Now to talk further about this working group, we have with us Dr. Bong Young-shik from the Yonsei Institute for North Korean Studies. It's good to have you here with us.
Happy to be here again.
So this working group is convening for the first time. It's being made out as a body that will help foster better communication and cooperation between the US and South Korea. But what do we actually know about it and what will it look like?
Well, we have to wait and see because this working group between Washington, D.C. and Seoul is just off the ground now. It'll be like learning by doing and defining its missions as they, by the name of the organization indicates, working together on, as Ambassador Lee Do-hoon puts it, all areas of cooperation between the United States and South Korea. So it is likely to deal with a wide range of issues lying between the two allies, as well as all different assortments of issues, ranging from inter-Korean economic cooperation and lifting economic sanctions in response to potentially important actions taken by North Korea for denuclearization and the fulfillment of a major agreements in summit meetings between North Korean leadership and South Koreans and the United States. But we have to remember two things. The working group is supposed to be organized between North Korea and the United States prior to South Korea and the United States deciding to have their own working group. That means that a dialogue between North Korea and the United States has not been moving along very well, as well illustrated by the last-minute cancellation of the meeting between Mr. Kim Yong-chol from North Korea and Mr. Mike Pompeo, Secretary of State of the United States in New York. And another fact is that if the regular and official communication and cooperation channels between South Korean government and US government have been working just fine in dealing with North Korea, then we basically do not need this new working group between the two allies. So having this working group just started indicates that communication and cooperation between the United States and South Korea have not been as good as it should have been.
I mean, but this working group does still seem a little vague. I mean, how does it differ from the previous arrangements when Lee Do-hoon would go to the US and meet with Steve Biegun? If they're going to chair this working group in the first place, then how does it change from what they had there before?
It implies that there is fissure and differences of opinions and the priorities between Washington and Seoul, despite the official rhetoric by the South Korean government that there is no daylight between the two allies. It seems like there is daylight, and it's getting larger and larger. So it is appropriate measures taken by both governments to tighten the bolts before the chasm between the two allies in dealing with North Korea by keeping different agendas in harmony and balance is getting worse. For instance, one of the potential agendas that will be discussed in the working group, I expect, will be how to do the humanitarian aid toward North Korea, as the previous news segment reported that the North Korean public desperately needs humanitarian aid, considering the worsened mortality rate of the infants because of a very dire economic and health situations on the ground. But at the same time, the United States is very firm that until North Korean leadership is going to take concrete steps toward the denuclearization, no economic sanctions will be lifted. So there is a differences in terms of sequencing between Moon-jae-in government of South Korea and the Trump administration of the United States. So I guess the main mission of this working group will be putting everything on the table and try to, make a concerted effort to begin something that is actually workable without diluting the pressure on North Korea for denuclearization.
So you talk about the differences that the two sides seem to have right now. And actually, so one of the first is on Tuesday is going to be the first official meeting of this working group. And the speculation is that one of the main topics of that will be discussing the inter-Korean railway project that South Korea has been pursuing with North Korea. Now, the U.S. has shown some reservations about it. But do you think this kind of meeting will help resolve some of the differences here?
Well, it'll be a test run for two allies to, check where they are standing together and separately. United States' position is very simple, that major economic joint projects should not be allowed until North Korean leadership is going to take the first step toward verifiable denuclearization. And so that the railway project or similar major economic cooperation project between the two Koreas are not likely to be supported by the Trump administration of the United States. What Trump administration has done compared to previous Obama administration in dealing with the North Korean leadership is make the game plan as simple as possible. It is strategic patience, but it is not just a simple waiting game. As long as North Korea is taking time without taking concrete actions of denuclearization, it will not be the United States and its allies that will suffer from no action and no result, but it will be North Korea that will be bleeding under very harsh and direct economic sanctions. So the game is very simple for President Trump. North Korea has to give up nuclear weapons. Otherwise, its Panmunjeom policy, simultaneous pursuit of nuclear weapon development and economic development, will not be realized because the second pillar of the project of Panmunjeom policy, which is economic development, cannot be successful as long as North Korea will be under the economic sanctions. So the Trump administration's North Korea policy is very straightforward and simple, that it must be North Korea, not the United States or any other country, that has to make the strategic decision first.
So on those negotiations towards denuclearization, they've been stalled for a while, and it's been very difficult, it seems, for the U.S. to meet with North Koreans to get this negotiations going again. But it was reported in South Korean media recently that the head of the CIA's Korea Mission Center, Andrew Kim, was in Korea last week and held a secret meeting with the North Koreans at Panmunjeom. Now, there have been follow-up reports that saying this cannot be confirmed. But what do we know so far, and what do you think these reports could be credible?
I think the secret meeting, if it had actually taken place in South Korea, Panmunjeom, between North Korea and the United States, then that's a good sign that both sides still maintain the thin thread of hope for meaningful dialogue, so that the agreement forged between the two leaders in Singapore summit meeting in June is going to continue. But we have to caution ourselves that the thread of dialogue is getting thinner and thinner because all the planned and scheduled meetings, including the meetings which was supposed to take place in Vienna between Mr. Stephen Biegun, Special Representative for North Korean Affairs for the Trump administration, did not take place. And the meeting between Mr. Kim Young-chul and Secretary Mike Pompeo got canceled. So this is just one of the very indirect and unofficial effort agreed by both sides to maintain the faint hope for settling the issues through dialogue and negotiations. So it is a good thing that the dialogue took place if it can be confirmed as true, but this cannot really replace the official channels of communication between the United States and North Korea if both sides are going to get what they want to get.
Let's shift focus a little bit and turn to China, North Korea's closest ally. So last week, President Moon Jae-in met with the Chinese President Xi Jinping, where she confirmed that North Korea had sent him an invitation to visit Pyongyang soon, but that he won't be doing that until sometime early next year. Now, why do you think he's delaying that till next year when the invitation has been sent? Does it seem that he's looking at how the North Korea-U.S. talks go first?
I believe so. If you look back, the reactions by the Xi Jinping government of China to the development of the dialogue, including the summit meeting between Kim Jong-un and Trump in June. Then China always wanted to maximize its leverage on North Korea and the Korean Peninsula affairs. So it makes more strategic sense for Xi Jinping government of China to wait until there will be actually second summit meeting between U.S. President Donald Trump and the North Korean leader Kim Jong-un, sometime, if things are going well, sometime early next year. Then, right before the summit meeting between United States and North Korea taking place, and immediately after the summit meeting, then Xi Jinping government is going to make this official visit to North Korea happening in order to maximize its leverage on North Korea. But if President Xi Jinping of China is going to meet Chairman Kim Jong-un prior to the summit meeting between U.S. and the PRK, I don't think there's much to gain for China in terms of directing North Korean leadership in ways that will benefit the most China's strategic interest.
The South Korean president also invited Xi Jinping to Seoul, and Xi said he'll visit sometime next year again. But it's probably not likely that he'll visit Seoul first before he visits Pyongyang, because obviously China and North Korea are supposed to be close allies, and probably Pyongyang won't take that too well if they visit Seoul first, right?
Right. China's strategic position is always best served if China is able to play one against the others, like North Korea against South Korea and the United States against the two Koreas, or in many different ways. So why does Xi Jinping government want to waste its strategic bargaining chips too early and prematurely? So I believe that the sequence of his diplomatic initiatives will be first waiting for the result of the, waiting for the news whether there will be actually another meeting between U.S. President and the leader of North Korea. Then China is going to get involved in North Korea and Korean affairs. Then China is going to approach aggressively to South Korea so that China's strategic position will be enhanced.
One more topic before we go as well. So on Sunday and Monday, representatives from the two Koreas met in North Korea to hold a joint event marking the 20th anniversary of the Mount Keungang tour project, which of course is currently stalled. That was suspended after, of course, 10 years ago when a tourist was shot there in 2008. And it's the first time a joint event has been held like this in a few years as well. What should we make of this event, especially with the Hyundai chair who went there representing South Korea, came back and said, the tours will restart at some point, but not this year?
Not this year must be the emphasis that the president wanted to, emphasize to the public, because sometime next year can mean any time in the future, right? It can happen immediately with the beginning of the next year, depending upon what kind of strategic position North Korean leadership is going to declare at the beginning of year 2019. So I wouldn't say that the prospect for the resumption of regular operation of the tourism at the Mountain Keungang site, led by Hyundai Group, is really bright, because it is closely subject to the existing economic sanctions on North Korea. Nothing major can happen unless there will be a major shift in U.S. position with regard to nuclear North Korea. We have to remember that it only needs the United States alone to prevent North Korea from achieving economic prosperity. But it requires more than the United States, the rest of the world, to help North Korea escape from existing economic sanctions. United States alone cannot quickly cancel all the existing economic sanctions, especially the sanctions passed through the United Nations Security Council. It requires more than the United States. So North Korea, if it wants to be a normal state, then it has to address all the issues, not just with the United States, but with the rest of the world to meet the international standards. So you are basically looking at a very, very long haul.
That's where we'll have to end it. Thank you for coming on the show, as always.
You're welcome.